Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner, and recently myself and the Forbidden Planet Massive attended MCM Comic Con London, and we held 3 panels at the show, one of which is already available on Forbidden Planet TV, and that is my conversation with the mighty Dan Slott about the work he's doing for us with Doctor Who. And there was also a panel with Titan Comics editors Phoebe Hedges and Jake Devine, and that will be coming soon to Forbidden Planet TV. But here today is the panel that I hosted with Emma Vieceli, the author of Titan Comics Life is Strange series, and Phoebe Hedges, the editor of Titan Comics Life is Strange series. We got a long chat about many things to do with the creation of Life is Strange, and there is even a musical element to this conversation. So enjoy.
Hey, greetings everybody. My name's Andrew Sumner. I am the Executive Vice President of Titan Comics. That's a highfalutin title. I don't really know what it means. I'm also the host of Forbidden Planet TV on YouTube. So if you still want to see lots of interviews with our creators, just come to check us out on YouTube, Forbidden Planet TV. But this is our Titan Comics Life is Strange panel, starring the one and only mighty editor of Life is Strange, Phoebe Hedges. And the one and only mighty writer of all 6 seasons of Life is Strange, Emma Vieceli.
There I am.
Yeah.
There we go. This is the first time that I'm realizing that Phoebe and Andrew have bodies. Because if any of you have seen any of our interviews, we've never met in person before.
No, that's true.
I've only ever seen Emma from the shoulders up.
And it's generally me going, that's like my face.
And it is the same for all 3 of us. It's a shoulders up relationship.
It is.
It's the way forward.
I mean, it's what we've all been living for a few years, right?
It's my best angle at any rate, so sorry for you to see me in person.
Now, guys, we've just completed our 6th and just as glorious as the other 5 season of Life is Strange comics, the glorious conclusion, if you will. Before we talk about that, can you both lay it on the audience how you got to be a comic book editor, Phoebe, and how you became a comics writer, Emma? Because you both have very interesting roots to the positions you occupy.
Okay.
Shall I start, or?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so I started Titan as an editorial assistant. I applied, I was very lucky, I got in, and then I worked my way up through the company. Life is Strange had already started and was on about issue 4 or 5 by the time I even joined Titan. So I came onto the series, for the partners in time, what we would call volume 4.
We've all followed the numbering fun of this comic, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I came on board for volume 4 and sort of that point onwards. Yeah, I also didn't know the game before I started reading the comics. I've now played it, don't worry. I didn't get the best ending. But yeah, so it's kind of, I've not grown up with Life is Strange, but it's grown with me and I've grown with it, which has been exciting.
So there's
Wonderful.
2 things for like how I got into generally writing comics, but also how I kind of haven't been able to escape the vortex that is Life is Strange because I love it so hard. As a comic creator, I used to draw all the time. I love video games, I love comics, but actually I trained in theatre. I'm a singer and actor, and I used to love telling stories, but I used to write plays and direct plays, but I read comics, and then finally when I was, I don't know, don't want to give away my age, but I was a certain age when someone basically said, well, have you not thought of like making a comic? It's like, people can make comics? You don't just pick them off trees? People make them. And I joined a group called Sweat Drop, and that we would make our own comics, like independent comics. So that was how it started, writing and drawing my own stuff. Then I sort of fell into being an artist more than anything. And then to bring it back to Life is Strange, I'd been writing for my own comics, but at the point, when the first Life is Strange game came out, I obviously fell hard for it, absolutely loved it. I did some fan art of Chloe, like really early, bad fan art of Chloe, and was lucky enough that Square saw it, and I ended up doing basically some promotional illustrations as the first game was coming out. So that was way back when. Then jumped to years later, I was drawing Doctor Who for Titan, and Andrew James, who at that point was an editor at Titan, is now, funnily enough, brand manager at Square for Life is Strange at the Vortex.
And he is a legendary comic book figure as well in
He's
the
amazing.
UK. Andrew James, the mighty Andrew James, wherever you are, Andrew, we're thinking of you.
So he was my editor for Doctor Who with Titan and said, we've got the license for Life is Strange. I know you're a fan. Do you want to draw it? And at the time, I did not have time to draw the comic, and my heart broke. I was like, no, this is opportunity. This is so sad. So he said, well, how about writing it? And I'd not written comics for someone else to draw before. I'd written them for myself. But the idea of how could I possibly say no to writing Life is Strange? And so the journey began, and we found Claudia, and who I wish could be here, and Andrea. So I've given it a very long-winded answer. I apologize. But I was kind of writing and drawing for myself, and then I was an artist, and then writing sort of followed on.
It was exactly the glorious, long-winded answer that I was looking for, mate. And Emma touched upon the fact that we've had this amazing creative team that she has led over 6 glorious seasons of Life is Strange, with Claudia Leonardi, our artist, and Andrea Izzo, our kind of all-Italian team, as we were talking about just before we started. And we're now getting to the end of our whole Life is Strange enterprise with Volume 6, Settling Dust, which we'll talk about in some detail. But before that, guys, do you think you could take us on the journey you've been on up to this point? You know, you can keep it relatively spoiler-free, but where have we got to over 5 seasons?
So, I mean, probably a lot of you guys already know some of this, but when I first got brought on, it was to do 4 issues, a mini-series, which was obviously Dust. And pretty much Square, I mean, we should say from the get-go that everyone involved with this comic, whether it's Square, Titan, myself, Claudia, Andrea, everyone is a huge fan of the game, which has, on the one hand, helped because we're all so excited about it. And my first ever meeting was myself, Andrew James, and some of the team at Square. And we just sat in a room and went, like for a while, because we just love it so much, which hopefully comes through. But at that point, we were going, Square basically said, we want you to take the Save Chloe ending, spoilers, and do 4 issues. That's kind of a coda to that. Obviously, so I just got distracted by seeing Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch in the audience. That's awesome. I know, that's a fantastic crossover. As a fan of the game, my big thing going in was that, as we all know, we all have our own story for Life is Strange. There is no one story. So I went in there from the beginning saying, I don't want to tell this as the story because it's not going to fit what everyone does. So everyone was on board with the idea of saying it's kind of a thing that happened. But this first 4 issues was meant to be a standalone thing. I wrote it according to what was sort of laid out then. And then by the time we started heading towards issue 4, halfway through writing issue 4, it was decided, you know what, this is going to go ongoing. So suddenly in the last half of issue 4, it became a mad scramble of like, right, change what I'd planned. And I think with this story, it's probably safe to say, we don't want to spoil too much, but if you've read the beginning, you kind of know where it's going. And it was always going there. It's just it took a bit longer to get there. And what was lovely is that in the process, I got to tell so many other stories and bring in characters we wouldn't have been able to before. So I think as a journey, it really has evolved as it's gone. And obviously we've had different editors coming on board. Having the same creative team throughout has been really, really special. And I think probably in terms of the stormy ride, the title of the panel, the only times things have got awkward is because everyone cares so much and people go in different directions. And obviously Square own this game. Like, there is no question. They own Life is Strange. We are very lucky to get to play in their world. But I am also a very stubborn creator. And I had a couple of meetings. I had a 3-hour-long meeting where I literally fought for what I wanted to see happen. It was me and Andrew James at the time. Just because it was in early days of the franchise, so people had different ideas, and they've been so supportive and let me tell my story, which means a hell of a lot, actually. So for me to be able to look at where we are now and know I did get to tell that story, there were points we might not have, but we got here.
I mean, that kind of segues into what I was going to ask both of you next is, because you have been blessed with having that continuity of creators, which, of course, all the great comic book runs over the last 20 years, over the last 60 years, of course, of my entire life, but over the last 20 years, it has that continuity of creation. So whether it's Ultimate Spider-Man and it's Mark Bagley and it's Brian Michael Bendis, whether it's Brubaker and Phillips with all the great crime books, being able to work with the same people and fashion that vision, that's everything. It's a blessing.
And Claudia and Andrea are just, like, Claudia hadn't really done much in comics before. Again, she'd done a lot of fan art and fan comics of Life is Strange. And that first meeting I went into where they basically said, here's the artist. They were looking at about 6 artists at the time, and they laid this stuff out on the table, and all of them were beautiful. But Claudia's, I don't know, there was something in it that you could just see in her art how much she cared about the story, and everything was so alive.
She has such a great talent for capturing emotion and capturing people's faces. We've chatted about it before, about how do you capture that look in people's eyes? And I mean,
I'm lucky because half my script is just me saying, this look in their eyes is very important right now.
Yeah.
Good luck.
She's got a faraway look in her eyes because she knows something that the audience won't know just yet.
Yeah. I mean, on the one hand, hopefully, as an artist myself, I think I write scripts that, I'm not going to have the classic, we see their back silhouetted against the sun, they are smiling. That's not going to happen in my scripts. But on the other hand, because I would normally draw it, I did throw a lot of this very subtext. There are no words, it's all in the art. But Claudia just rose to it so well.
And how does it feel for all of you, emotionally, to have banked 25 issues and to be roaring towards the conclusion?
I mean, it's been huge. I've not even been on all 25, but I've been on enough. And watching, I think it's of Settling Dust of the final arc, I think it's issue 2, issue 3, where, there's the big double-page spread where it's, Max and Chloe. The first, even from, the sketches of that page, I got goosebumps and I was tearing up when the colors came in. I immediately had to send it around the office to be like, oh my God, look at this, oh my God. It's a 2-page spread and Life is Strange.
I very rarely get to see pencils, but I saw those.
Yeah, I had to share them. So yeah, it's been huge. And I've not even from the beginning.
I said to someone at the table earlier on that I don't know, quick show of hands, how many of you read the last volume? Who's up to date? About half and half.
Right,
So we won't spoil
Good.
anything then. But, it's all, you know where it's going. It's the telling that matters. But the final speech has been in my head for 2 years. I've known I wanted that. And literally sitting at the keyboard, writing, typing that speech out, I think the enormity of it hit me that we'd actually got there and that those characters had got there, and it was really emotional, and I was just crying as I had to stop typing because I couldn't see the screen, because I can't write without speaking the words because I'm just that tragic. So I sit there in my house acting out the words, and I got really emotional and I did cry.
I mean, it's completely understandable. You have delivered an emotional powerhouse, roundhouse punch, if you will. And that's your acting background, right? You inhabit the characters when you're writing.
I think maybe, yeah. I mean, I think to write, you sort of always end up inhabiting characters a bit, don't you? But it's a really interesting experience. I've written characters before, but writing characters who I've played or have run around with in a game, and probably for you guys reading characters who you've run around with in a game, it's like a different level of comic reading, because you're not just reading characters on a page. You're I've had conversations with these characters. I've been that character. It's a different kind of connection, I think.
I mean, I'm trying to tread very carefully here for anybody who hasn't read the final arc. But
yeah, that's the lead up to the moment that made me cry.
Yeah, there we go. Right on. The timing though is impeccable.
Yeah.
But of course, things kind of sort of end up where they started. So kind of sort of. Can you talk about that a bit, guys?
Yeah. So obviously, sort of geographically, they end up where they started. But I love it because it's sort of very different from the beginning, I'm going to say it. Arcadia Bay is very different from where we found it in the first volume, which I think is really interesting. And we actually had a lot of conversations about where is Arcadia Bay, where's Joyce's diner, how has the community developed in the wake of this tragedy, which I think is great that we came back to.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm sure most of you have read enough for it to be fair to say that there's sort of parallel strings happening. And Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about what I didn't want Chloe's life to have just stopped, because you keep going, and I think rather than have Chloe mourning and waiting and being like, that's not Chloe Price. She's a fighter. I'm going to try not swear in this part. It's really hard to talk Life is Strange and not use swear words. But yeah, she's a fighter. And so I really like twisting it round into the idea that, yeah, she is the lighthouse. She's going to shine. She's going to help you get back. She's not going to just sit there. So it was sort of like, what's her life been? What's she been doing? So it was nice to kind of revisit where she's been. But also, I think, in a way, back to where it starts, but in a way not, because internally, really not. And I think the biggest journey throughout the whole thing is Max's journey as a character. I mean, for a lot of the characters, they end in a very different place internally from where they started. But the biggest thing is that's kind of Max's journey is not just a geographical or a temporal journey. It's emotionally who she is at the beginning, and working out who she is and what she really needs and what she wants, and sometimes stepping out of that for a while is what makes you realize what you need.
Right on, I think that's very well said. I'm going to give you both 3 words that I want you to talk about as much as you feel you're able to. Yeah. You're taking the words right out of my mouth. In the words of Meatloaf, or thereabouts. So here are the 3 words, and this is a 3 words discuss, okay? Rosemary for remembrance.
All right, hands up who got Rosemary for remembrance. Thank you. So,
yeah, look at that. Well done, mate.
Yeah, I can't even put my own
good.
hand up because I only realised it after we'd sent the book to print.
Hopefully it doesn't matter if you didn't, but basically Rachel is playing Ophelia in Hamlet. Ophelia's... There's a sort of subtext to this as well, actually. You don't need to know it for the story to matter. But as a point of interest, I am a Shakespearean nerd, and my first professional book was drawing Hamlet. I care a lot about Hamlet. Coming up through theatre, I care about, Shakespeare generally. And I wanted to use Hamlet because there were so many little, tangents between Hamlet and the Life is Strange story, and especially Rachel. And Rachel and Ophelia, and being able to... Sorry, this is slightly spoilery for people who haven't read it, I'm so sorry. But there's a conversation that, funny enough, I penciled, actually, and that one, I do the drawing on that one, that's literally Rachel and her director, and they're discussing Ophelia as a character, and it was sort of this perfect opportunity to discuss Rachel's role in the series. Which will make more sense when you read it, and if you have read it, you'll know what I mean. But basically, by the time we get to that moment, there is a conversation that she has with Max on the beach.
Yeah, it's like the end of volume 3.
Yeah, one of the times they think Max is leaving, and they actually say the Rosemary for remembrance then. And it's basically one of the things Ophelia says when she's going through her flowers and plants, and she says, "There's Rosemary, that's for remembrance." So because they had that conversation, it's a nice little nod from Rachel that when she's sending something through, that's sort of the code, so Max would know exactly who it was without giving it away. Whether she thought it was going to be seen by a particular other person, I don't know. I don't know whether she did, but...
Well, speaking of your glorious cast list, how much thought and how easy or difficult was it to come up with the characters that you've brought back over the course of the series? From Arcadia Bay, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, how difficult to come up with them? Not very, because there's a whole host of characters that we love to use, that we would have loved to use more of. One of the early, I think, just before you joined, well, it would have been because it was at the beginning, and I'm sure they don't mind me saying now because we're at this point and we can, but when I first signed up, I was literally told, point blank, everybody's dead. Everybody is dead. You can use nobody, no one at all. And it really was just because at that point... I mean, you've got to think, at the point when I started on this, Life is Strange 2 it was being written at the time. So things that they maybe threw in, like the photograph, I was writing the comic already. So we sort of ended up playing this game of every now and then there'd be something out from Square going, no, don't touch that. Or, yeah, that now is a thing. So I'd be like, scribble, 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 rewrite that scene. There's a lot of other characters I'd like to have used. But I think the ones we got to visit... primarily, I like redemption stories, and I think, again, slight spoiler, I'm so sorry, guys, but, well, obviously getting to use Rachel more than I thought I could was fab. Getting to bring Victoria in and giving her that
I really love
redemption.
Victoria as like a foil to the rest of the
Yeah.
cast. And you captured her voice really well. Like
Oh,
the
good.
better late than never moment at the end of Volume 6 is... Because I remember, obviously, we were chatting with AJ about it, and he flagged it as being like, this is a bit... But then as he thought about it, it made more sense.
Yeah.
Because she does have all these little idioms and, you know, go your selfie and that whatnot.
Go watch your selfie.
I can't say it. There might be children around.
Yeah, so I was glad I got to at least, Warren was off the, R.I.P. Warren is gone, but getting to use him as a flicker, getting to be allowed in the first place to use the flickers as a thing opened up my storytelling so much, which was fab. So it was like a playbox of getting to explore all these characters. I could have written issues about all of them, you know. I'd love to have done a backstory of Warren and Brooke first becoming, there's just so many cool characters. Getting to have Steph join us towards the end, which was a really late...
Yeah, that was a bit of a Titan push.
Yeah. We were like, can we?
How will we squeeze her in somewhere? She's in Seattle. Where can...
And there she is, right here.
Yeah.
So it was sort of like we as the comic, whilst we got to tell our own comic verse, which was very special, we had to also work around what was happening in the games. And it's hard to remember looking back that we were writing, the comic was coming out before Life is Strange 2 came out. So we were sort of, the Bible of the series was evolving as we went. And that's for Square as well. So there'd be things that would get thrown at us that suddenly we can use, or suddenly you can't use that anymore. So to be able to weather all of that and keep our original thread and just weave things into it has been great. But thank you past me brain for coming up with the transect, because it just allowed me to tell so many stories.
No, I think that was particularly wonderful.
There's Ophelia. Oh, she's gone.
Hey, there we go. Something that we've talked about in the past. So as I mentioned at the top, we've had a bunch of conversations about Life is Strange on Forbidden Planet TV on YouTube, and there was a period of time when I think, Emma, we were talking to each other about Life is Strange more than we were seeing actual real-life friends of ours. Yeah. And so you can go onto YouTube, check out Forbidden Planet TV, and you'll probably see, I think it's about 6 or 7 interviews about the life of Life is Strange, about each edition as it got released. But something we talked about a bunch in the past, and I'm very interested in both of your views on this, is the challenge of keeping the different versions of Chloe distinct.
Yeah.
So first of all, could you talk a bit about keeping Chloe distinct from herself?
I mean, a lot of the credit for that comes down to Claudia and Andrea. When I was writing it, oh my goodness, this story, I made it so difficult for myself. It was so difficult. So I have reams of files showing, there's literally charts that show the high seas waves, high seas dust, Chloe, like all the different people. Where's Tristan at that point? Because he's one of the only erratic, like he's a free agent, so he could be between the two. He's the, well, no, he's not the only one, but he's one of the very few characters who don't repeat. So I had to keep tracks, of where everyone was between all the universes, and making sure that a road trip, the Square love their road trips, you gotta have a road trip. So making sure that all the journey times made sense, making sure even things like cameos like Brody, trying to work out where everyone was at the right time so that everything logically made some kind of a sense. And I started off by just, lots of charts. Then it was Claudia and Andrea who came up with this genius idea of these slightly different color schemes. I mean, we knew Chloe's hair would be different. Yeah. But they even had the high seas, had different, slightly different hair, different clothing. And then Andrea, whether it was subtle, so I don't know how you would have, he used a slightly different color palette between the two verses. So you sort of had this subconscious knowledge. As soon as you opened a page, you kind of had a sense of which world you were in. But also the biggest credit literally goes to you guys and the people reading it, because from the first 4 issues, this was not an easy comic to read. The flickers in the first 4 issues were such a risk.
They were so subtle.
You know, we were, and I remember saying to Titan and Square at the time, we were like, we're not making this just for comics readers. We're making it for people who've played Life is Strange. These people know how to seek out a mystery. They know how to look for clues. But it could have all fallen on its arse, because if people had picked up that comic and did not resonate with the idea of flickers, and then later on didn't get into that mindset of the two verses, it just wouldn't have worked at all. So early on, the first, who knows, it could have been one of you, but that some of the early tweets from people who were posting up that shot in the bathroom and seeing, oh, the graffiti has changed. The first time those were coming through, we were like, yes, because we felt so vindicated that I knew they'd get it. And from that point, we were flying, because then it was like, we know we can push the boundaries of storytelling in this, and the readers are with us. So yeah, balancing two verses is very, very difficult. And then by the last few issues, I copied Claudio and Andrea's trick, and I just started scripting in different colors. So literally all the scripts for one were in blue, and all the scripts for the other were in orange, because it was the easiest way, because we're jumping between.
I remember you telling me that at the time, and I thought, well, that's just a brilliant way to do it. But I think that's a really interesting way in which your creative alchemy, which is the thing that's delivered those messages, the creative alchemy between the four of you on the book and the fact that it's been so readily absorbed by the fan base, that's that then bleeding over into your creative process, which I think is such a beautiful and fascinating thing.
It's been it's been a pretty interactive experience. I mean, it's a comic of a game, you know. What's a comic of a game if not slightly interactive, especially one like this, where everyone reading has got their own version of events anyway. So the last thing we wanted to do was present Life is Strange fans with, here's a cut and dried single facet story. Like, it just wouldn't have worked for this title.
No, of course. And an element that I think you particularly have brought to the whole series is the element of musicality. Yeah. So before I elaborate on that, could you just talk a bit about that, and about how your passion and interest in music has evinced itself within the book?
I don't know when I first decided I wanted a band, but I figured if the girls are hanging out in Seattle, it's a cool music scene in Seattle.
Yeah. Great music city.
Yeah, I could. I mean, at that point, I didn't know Steph was there. Like, we wrote that with no idea that Steph was there. So the fusion in this series is amazing. Like, so for those of you who've been able to see the free comic book day, it doesn't matter because it doesn't fit with the main story, but we kind of reveal in that Steph and Pixie are friends, and that Pixie's who taught Steph how to play the drums. So I love the idea that the drummer from the High Seas is, and they're like role-play nerds, so Pixie plays Steph's role-play games, and she teaches Steph drums, which is fun. So I thought, it's Seattle, let's have a band, and I could totally see Chloe doing, logo designs and stuff for a band, and Max would obviously take photos. It just fit perfectly for both of them making a life. I could see them building their life around some, hipster local band. The fact that Titan were okay with me making this band a bunch of pirates
I have always wondered where like a pirate punk band, came into play.
Do you know where it comes from? And I don't know if this is going to make me seem cooler or more tragic, probably more tragic. If any of you have ever read Lord of the Flies, this is a really weird, tenuous link.
It's leaning towards tragic.
It's pretty tragic. Let's face it, it's tragic.
It's certainly not amusing.
There's a line in Lord of the Flies that really stuck with me. There was someone saying, I should be leader because I can sing C#. And I loved the idea of, if you can sing a high C, then you're badass. So and that's literally what gave me this. And I thought, oh my God, what if, because singing a high C sounds like the high seas. Oh, they could be pirates. It's just, it's tragic, isn't it?
I have never realized that was a pun. I always thought it was somehow tied to how, Max and Chloe used to play pirates as kids. That's where my brain was.
The beauty is that it does work. It does play into that. But I just loved the idea of the high seas. And I mean, the pirate, obviously, because of Max and Chloe, the pirate thing also made it. If it hadn't been Max and Chloe, I probably would have been told, no, they can't be pirates. But the fact that I was like, but it kind of works with the story, so we got away with it.
I think any major plot development that is born out of a pun, you've got to give major props to.
Right.
Right?
And then obviously they're a band, and obviously we're working in comics, so music doesn't really feature hugely in comics. But a few years ago, probably a lot of years ago, I was drawing Gem and the holograms for IDW. Yes, yes. I love Gem so much. And if any of you saw our run on that, so Sophie Campbell was the first artist, and then I followed her. I followed Sophie Campbell, and the way Sophie had woven music and lyrics into the comic was so cool that I did it obviously when I was drawing the issues. So I thought this can be done. We can use the lyrics. And I was desperate to have something that could tie these universes together in like a subtle way. I knew I wanted repeat characters, and also it was sort of a clue as to Pixie, like way early on. I mean, when you're reading Dust, you don't think twice about it. She's a girl who writes lyrics.
It's just a fun coincidence.
Yeah, but obviously I knew what she was then, so I wanted stuff to be in place, and I thought song lyrics is a really fun way of sort of introducing stuff that she's like drawing on things that aren't happening here. She's drawing on stuff she's seen in other places, and so yeah, we got to like throw the lyrics in. The first one, the Ghost in Your Own Time, was just, I can hear the soundtrack in my head. Like, they're at that shot of, I don't know if any of you have seen it, and I don't know if they're here. There's a couple of amazing artists who do photo sets, and they're actually playing with the comic verses, and they did a full photo of Chloe doing the mural on the wall, which was so cool. And then the other song, which sees us right through to the end, me being me, it wasn't enough to just write some lyrics. I wrote the songs, and then I sent Chloe terrible recordings of me on a piano, like, and yes, what you're probably alluding to is this White Ass's here.
We've got
We've
a
managed
music-based treat for you.
to bully Emma into bringing her ukulele to the stage.
You may notice we have a ukulele bag on the stage. That is because it contains a ukulele, which Emma can play.
So let's not get carried away. Emma can
strum it.
You know.
Yeah. So I don't know if you give her a big enough round of applause. She might perform the song for you. Yes.
This is going to be so humiliating, especially following a woman who was just rocking up
I
here.
know. Did you catch the rap performance?
So, They Say Forever is a Long Time is a high C song written by Pixie, sung by Tammy. I, in my normal life, am more of a Dex than anything else. I play keyboards. I don't play strings, but I'm not bringing a piano here. So,
Emma, do you want me to hold my microphone?
Yeah, maybe. This is...
Think it through.
I can't believe it.
Maybe I'll get the ukulele and your vocals.
Yeah.
Let's see if this works.
Probably. This is going to be so out of tune. Can you hear that at all? Okay, so you'll know the lyrics. Sing along. Can't believe I'm about to do this. I can't hear it. They say forever is a long time, but I don't hear a word they say. They say forever is a long time, but I guess I must have found a way to break the rules and surf the wave. I don't know the lyrics. Because forever starts the day I make you mine. With so much there between us, so many words unsaid, I wish that I could speak to you, declare what's in my head. Can we leave the past behind and draw a line? 'Cause forever starts the day I make you mine. They say forever is a long time, but I don't hear a word they say. They say forever is a long time, but I guess I must have found a way to bend the rules and surf the tides of time. 'Cause forever starts the day I make you mine. Connection's just a feeling, not something you can hold, but its echoes send us reeling, and it's heavier than gold. And when you find it, bind it hard and twine. 'Cause forever starts the day mine. They say forever is a long time, but I don't hear a word they say. They say forever is a long time, but I guess I must have found a way to bend the rules and surf the tides of time. 'Cause forever starts the day I make you mine. Yeah, forever starts the day I make you mine.
Yes! Yes!
Is that the nerdiest thing that's ever happened at a comic? I'm like, this is someone who's going to sing the song that she wrote for a comic. Oh my God. I'm not Tammy or any of the High Seas. They would do a much more rocking version. Mine's kind of like a soft country version. They'd be like, it'd be great. Not like I do it.
I think that was wonderful. One more round of applause, everybody.
So when you read the end, you now know the tune that's playing as all that's happening.
So there are a couple of little things we want to do. We're racing towards a conclusion. But as we race towards that conclusion, I think we've probably got time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Yeah. If anybody has a question, and if you do, if you don't, it's cool, because we've got more things to do. But if you do have a question, please raise your hand. Yes. Lauren will get you a mic. Hang on. This is the mighty Lauren Noding, everybody.
Is it working?
Yes.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, I love the comic. What would be your advice for young comic writers and editors?
Are you yourself a comics writer?
Getting there.
Yay! I mean, the biggest advice in terms of creating, and it's cliche and you'll have heard it a billion times before, is just, if you want to get in comics, make comics. Obviously I'll pass this to you when I'm done as well. But as I said earlier, when I started out, it was literally folding. I'd go down Staples, I'd photocopy my double-page spread, I'd fold it, I'd staple it up, I'd bring it to a Comic Con, like my 50p comic. And they were terrible. They were hands down awful. But it meant that I got that initial kick of knowing, like, I can do it. And I set myself a challenge to just make a 20-page comic. So not like a vast epic, but a 20-page story, get it done, get it in people's hands, and you'll get that massive buzz. Obviously, there's a massive difference between working for yourself, which I recommend to anyone. I still do. My Breaks series, I still do independently. And then working on something like this where you're lucky enough to get paid for it. They're different avenues, but they feed in. And you are never losing anything by doing your own stuff, because I wouldn't have got this job if Andrew at Titan hadn't been reading Breaks. Because Breaks is a queer teen love story, and he knew I was a fan of Life is Strange, he knew he could ask me to write it. So you can never predict who's checking out what you've done, and you might have someone years from now who goes, I think I bought a single issue from you like 5 years ago. Oh, hey, are you free? Do you want to work on this? So yeah, like if you're getting in comics is as simple as making comics. Getting paid for comics is like the next step. But making them in the first place puts you in the right places to be seen by the people who will hire you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Emma's summed it up pretty much. Like, I always say social media is really great, hard to maintain, but really great to have a presence on social media. Just somewhere for you to be found, and people will find you eventually.
Editing specifically, is it different?
Editing specifically, it's a lot more traditional as far as I'm aware. Like as I said earlier, I went through it quite traditionally. I applied to work at a publishing house, and I've worked my way up. But also I think, yeah, I mean, it's the same sort of idea though. If you're editing like a friend's comic, you can say that you edited it and then just get that credit, and it gets you practice, so.
Actually, that's a really good point. I know quite a few people now a lot of independent creators, webcomic creators, they are looking for editors because webcomics has exploded, and a lot of creators are realizing that editors are quite important. Just to sort of be that gateway, check that everything's working fine. So I know quite a few webcomickers who now hire editors. Obviously, you're not going to get paid a load of money at the beginning, but if you're in places like this, walk around the artist alley, chat with people, see if there's work that resonates with you, and just get and chatting to the creators, really. I know it's a slightly cliche answer, but I hope it helps.
But I think the guys have made a really good point. this earlier on today, myself and Phoebe and Titan's group editor, Jake Devine, who's here in the front. Just stand up for a second, Jake.
Woo,
Man
Jake,
here with the
woo.
beard, yeah. We did a panel about editing comics and about, you know, starting out in your creative life. And I think the thing is, what a lot of people ignore, people want to be a writer, they want to be an artist, sometimes they want to be a colorist and letterer. But actually, the spine of everything we do in the comics business is editorial, and comics editorial is about project management. And there are so many useful and transferable skills that you have.
And I've worked with quite a lot of editors, whether Marvel, DC, Image, you know, editors who are actually writers. And so you'll be working, I've been caught before where I'm working with an editor and I'm like, oh, this person's an editor. And then they're like, oh, my book's out next week. And I'm like, oh, you're a writer. Like, because of course they're writers, because that's, you know, they edit because they can. They know how it works.
For sure. Thanks, mate. That was a brilliant question. And what we're going to do is we're going to close out on a request from Phoebe and from Emma, which is that this, as we've talked about, all the great creative work they and the rest of the team have done on Life is Strange has been directly fueled by you, the fandom of their work. And they want to get a photograph with everybody who's attended today. So we're going to do it one of two ways. Yeah, we're going to do both of two ways, rather. I'm going to get a selfie with the guys on the stage with you guys in the background. And then I'm going to get a picture of the two of them in front of you all, okay? And if you could, if it's possible, if you could stand up and cheer and wave your hands around while we're doing it, that would be even better.
Yeah, as much
Yeah,
as
much
safe
group
as you feel
activity as
together.
possible.
Don't group together if you don't want to, obviously. But
Selfie version first, okay?
okay.
So if you guys get, there we go. If you guys get a selfie on my right hand, you guys get some. So we'll be here. There we go. There we go. Yeah, come in. By the way, there's free comics for everybody here. Free comics for everyone at the front. Yeah, free comics. Please take these comics away. Take these comics away. We don't want to take them back to the office. They're for you. Okay, we all in? This is good. Right. Okay, this is good. All right, guys, give me some massive cheering right now. Excellent. Now get a photo of the two guys in front of you and get far enough back. There we go. Yeah, I've got it. Might try some extra widescreen so that it works.
It'd be easy to do it the other way round. Everyone facing that way. That's what they did in the last panel. Everyone around. The people can go down and ask.
That might make sense if you go out there.
Oh, right on. Of course it makes sense. Of course it makes sense. Yeah.
Did you want cosplayers on the stage with you? Any other cosplayers on stage?
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.